carefully just so I don't forget to
Okay.
do that. But basically, I'll have read an intro of a couple of seconds. And of course, your sponsorship role will be on this as well,
Ooh.
and the rest of the season. So that's super
Exciting.
exciting. And I'll want to address that and just talk a little bit about how I discovered you guys
Cool.
when you and I start talking as well, and then we'll just kind of jump into questions. I'm sure from our
Yeah.
first phone call where we were getting to know each other. I'll probably repeat some of the questions, but I like to have it feel very conversational, as if we're
Absolutely.
sitting down for a cup of coffee or we're having a glass of wine.
Perfect. Love that.
And, we'll just kind of go with the flow. I have an idea of a couple things that I want to ask. It's mostly
Okay.
just about your backgrounds, your
Sure.
childhood, role models, and then we'll kind of segue into your careers and leading up to the launch of ESAS, right?
Yes.
That was really cute when he sent me the recording. I was like, thank you.
I'm like, how do I do this phonetically? I'm like, let me just say it, you
Right.
know?
Yes, yes. And then, I'm interested in when you were employed in the cosmetics industry,
Yes.
which you both were, right?
Yes.
Um,
Correct.
just kind of different experiences and things that you picked up and learned from that.
Yep.
And then I always
Have
finish up
those.
with your top piece of advice for women in male dominated fields, including STEM fields. And so maybe I'll get one from each of you. And
Absolutely.
then we want to make sure that the listeners know where to find you online, and if they want to, obviously follow you on Instagram, or, even better, purchase your products, where they can do that. So we'll kind of wrap
Awesome.
up that way, and
Sounds
probably
good.
be about, maybe 30 minutes, sometimes 40, just
All right.
depends
Beautiful. I
how
love it.
much we talk. All right.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we will go ahead and just pause for a second, and you know what? And I'm totally embarrassed to be asking this, but
Theta.
Seda. Okay, I just want to make
Yes.
sure it wasn't like Seda and I was
You
pronouncing
know,
it
it's
wrong.
like ESAS. You say it however you want. I will
Yes.
respond. That's like growing up my real name is not even Seda. It's something else completely, but it's so much more complicated that I'm lucky that my
That
parents
Seda's
gave
the
me.
easier one.
Seda's the easier one. And so people call me Seda. They've called me Sarah. They've called me everything.
You're
So
like, whatever, I'll answer to it as
or
long
I'll
as you keep
answer.
calling me. No. All right. Well, we'll pause for a second, and then we'll get started. Well, ladies, I am so excited to have you on today. I told the listeners a little bit about you, but again, we have Seda and Amanda on from ASIS NYC Beauty, right?
Yes.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. So, I wanted to give a little bit more background on how I discovered you and how you came to be on the podcast. I discovered you through a mutual friend, Erica Brechtel. She and I actually go way, way, way back to college, and she is just like this master of design. She worked with you on your branding and your packaging.
Yes.
I
We're
feel
lucky
like
to have her.
everything she touches turns to gold.
Yes.
She's fantastic.
She is amazing. Absolutely.
And as our listeners can hear, you're also a sponsor of this podcast, which I was really excited and proud of
Mhm.
our partnership, because
Yes.
I discovered you and your company at a time when, mid pandemic, when I was and am constantly trying to keep my hands clean, both on the go and at work when I'm seeing patients. Can't always wash your hands between every touch point. And so I rely on alcohol based sanitizers and hand cleansers a lot. And so I discovered your hand cleanser. My hands were super dry, and I was so excited to have something with hyaluronic acid and other anti
Mhm.
aging things, because I'm like, I got to take care of my hands.
Exactly.
And so I wanted to make sure, I loved it so much. I wanted to make sure everyone I knew about it. So But
Thank you.
anyway, I was so excited to learn that the both of you have a solid and strong background in STEM.
Mhm.
You have a background in the sciences, and that's what led you to where you are today, among many other things. And
Yes.
so I wanted to have you guys on here to talk about that and hopefully inspire our listeners and
Mhm.
maybe teach them a thing or two as well.
Sounds good.
So tell me about where you grew up, how you grew up, and what about your childhood shaped you as a person and as somebody in STEM and as an entrepreneur?
So I can start. I'm Seda. So I was born in Jamaica, Queens, New York. So a New Yorker at heart, but I was born to Turkish immigrants. My parents came to the States in, I think, the early 70s, late 60s. And so I grew up between New York and New Jersey, but because my parents were Turkish immigrants, I still grew up within a very Turkish household. And so I think a lot of people who have parents who are immigrants can relate as to what that even means. And my grandparents also came and lived with us from a very young age. So I grew up very Turkish, and Turkish was my first language. And the first time I actually spoke English was in kindergarten. So that was a really interesting time to learn English. And I also spent almost every summer in Turkey with my grandparents and with the thousands and thousands of cousins that I have all spread throughout Turkey. Um, and so I, spent most of my childhood in New York, and then we moved to New Jersey. And I went to school in New Jersey. I went to college also in New Jersey. Wow, it's a lot of New Jersey. Haven't moved around that much, I guess. And I majored in chemistry. And I think from a very young age, I was always, they used to call me bloodhound when I was little because I was extremely curious. I would smell everything, I would touch everything. I never trusted anything or anybody. I was always had my hands in everything, tasting things and smelling things. And so, from a very young age, I was very curious. And I also think growing up bicultural, that made me very curious. I was always trying to sort of connect the dots. And so I think naturally, in high school, I was lucky to take organic chemistry freshman year. And so right away, I was like, oh, wow, finally a subject like it totally makes sense to me. And so I became very interested in chem. I went to college, like I said, in chemistry. And, I did chemical research for almost 3 years. And I was like, oh, this is kind of boring. Like, I love chemistry. I love exploring new things, but like, my gosh, like if this is going to be my future, I mean, it's a little, sad to be honest. So I luckily had somebody come and present in one of our classes about cosmetic chemistry. And I was like, wait, that like you can still be a chemist and make beauty products. I'm like, that's amazing. And so I was deciding at that time, should I do they had these PhD programs that you can sort of just attach to your undergrad. And so I had considered doing that. And then I said, let me just take this internship in cosmetic chemistry. And I absolutely loved it. I think it just sort of connected all the sensorial experiences that one could actually have, touch, smell. And so it was just right away, I fell in love with it. And so after I finished college, I actually continued to work there as a cosmetic chemist for, I think, almost 3 years. And we developed skincare and cosmetic products for all the major brands, and such an amazing experience because even though we had huge accounts, it was a really small company, and so I had my hands in everything, and that was really exciting. I got to go to major meetings with CEOs. I was making product. I was wiping the tables. I did everything literally. And then I went on to another company, which where I spent most of my career for 15 years, called Givaudan, and that is the world's leader in fragrance and flavor. And that was also obviously an amazing experience. I think I was in almost every role at that company, from lab to assistant to sales. And so I really grew and I really had my hands in everything there, but obviously on a much higher level and in a much
Mhm.
different way. Um, and just last year, I left Givaudan to co-launch ESAS with Amanda. And we've had, the most amazing experience, up, down, around and around. And we couldn't be more thankful and happier that we did it. And that's
That's
just kind
amazing.
of, yeah.
I love it. And it's funny how those chance encounters when like in college that you discovered that there was
Yes,
the ability to practice, your craft within cosmetics, and it's a wonderful
exactly.
marriage. And
Being
so
able to combine all that.
absolutely. And Amanda, tell me a little bit about how you got started. What was your childhood like and how did it influence you?
Okay, great. Thank you. I actually was born a few miles away from Seda in
Yeah.
Woodside,
Oh,
Queens,
how
in New
funny.
York, to Filipino immigrant parents. And I moved every 2 to 4 years because of my mom's job. But I also grew up with like a ton of allergies. And my parents, like first coming to America, they had no idea what this was. This was my sister and brother never had them. So like nut allergies, environmental allergies, eczema. I ran the gamut. So my mom would test so many different things on me. So I grew up with so many different products, so many, like the smell of oatmeal in my bathtub, like all these real sensorial things just to try to heal my skin. So I've always been fascinated with products. And whenever I would go to a store, always be like, I don't think any of these things would work on me. So I'd always, because with all the sensitive skin, it was always very difficult and challenging thing trying to find products. And so I really loved chemistry in high school, and then I ended up majoring in chemistry when I went to college. And then I also got an MS in cosmetic chemistry so that I can learn more about how products are formulated, how they're tested, and how these products even come to market. And it was really fascinating because I had no idea about this. I wish I had a podcast like yours when I was in college, because you only learn that there's only one way to use science, and it
Mhm.
wasn't until
Yes.
you really get out there into the world that you're like, oh wait, behind every product there's a scientist behind that.
Hmm.
So
Mhm.
that became really fascinating, and that really propelled me into whatever career that I wanted to go into. So from the get-go, I was a lab chemist from right out of college up till
Now.
up till now, and it's fun. It's
Yeah.
just it's fascinating to see how you put a few things together and something happens, and then being able to have an idea and then being able to execute that, and learning that there's so many facets when it comes to STEM, whether it's just in the initial with ingredients, with manufacturing, with processing, with physics, with biology,
Hmm.
that the beauty industry really has an opportunity to do something different with it. And so that also led Seda and I met each other at Givaudan.
Hmm.
We had similar backgrounds growing up, and then also this fascination when it came to chemistry and the opportunities that we could do for this industry.
Hmm.
That's wonderful. I think that had I learned in college that cosmetics chemistry was an option, or that, or maybe like food science and
Yes.
Yeah.
culinary, I probably would have taken a different path.
Mhm. Right. I know.
Yeah.
I
And
know. Mhm.
And
and
it
I
was
think
really
it's great that I'm sorry, go ahead.
oh
And
sorry
just
no
as an aside, this will be edited, and if we
Okay.
talk over each other, like just keep going because we
yeah.
will edit that out and it's different audio tracks. So,
Just a quick aside, I did an internship for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society when I was in college, and that's where I learned that there were scientists behind the products. I had no idea how this industry really worked, and it was only from then that I learned that this industry exists. It's funny.
that's awesome. So, who were your role models growing up? And I think that we always see the drop off of women out of STEM a lot of times in the junior high ages, right? You get younger girls interested in science in the elementary years, but then for some reason you get into the 11, 12, 13-year-old group and you start to lose girls from science. And so tell me about your role models and kind of how that linked in to you staying on that STEM path.
I think personally for me, I did not have a role model that was in STEM necessarily. My mother, when she came to this country, she was a seamstress. And in the early 80s, she actually started her own clothing manufacturing company. and they made haute couture for all these amazing brands. And so from a very young age, she had me doing a lot of things at the factory, but I was using my hands from a very young age. And, my father started a construction company. And so I think for me, from very early on, I was always working with my hands. And so there's something about, chemistry is something, it's not like for me, it was not like a subject, right? It's just all around you. It's like physics, it's like biology, it's like math. And so it helped for me explain a lot of what I was seeing around. And it helped me connect the dots of why certain things happen and why certain things don't. And so I was lucky that, like I said, I was able to take organic chemistry very early on with a female teacher, with a female professor in high school. And now that I think about it, that could very well be one of the reasons I felt very encouraged and motivated to stay within that field, because I had a physics teacher and he was a guy. And maybe that's why I didn't go into physics. And I do think there was a specific way that she explained it to us that really simplified it into its very basic elements and uncomplicated it. And I thought to myself, why? Why doesn't everybody else just love this subject as much as I do? Like, I don't get it.
Mhm.
And so I think because it was early in my high school career that I was able to adapt that mindset early on. And, we were I had a very, very small class. I think my graduating class in high school was probably 9 people. And
Oh,
so
wow.
it was intimate. And that made a big difference for me. I think just the ability to have the conversations with your teachers. I mean, even in college, we had a very small, I started off in a school that had, like tens of thousands of students. And then eventually I went to a smaller college, and we had a much smaller science department. And so there's something about that for me felt a lot more supportive, and it made me feel a lot more capable of, I think, completing a major within that field. There's something, science can seem so cold, and it's something really special about being able to create an intimate environment around that helped me, I think, kind of succeed on that path. The professors that I had were amazing. They were some of my closest friends in college, which sounds a little, nerdy, but I mean, it's true. And if you don't have that support, it's really hard to make it through, because you can get lost, and it can seem really, robotic and cold, because, everybody's majoring in business, everybody's majoring in the arts. And at one point I'm like, is this right? Am I doing the right thing? I mean, I wanted to go into medicine and then I quickly didn't. And I was like, well, I'm definitely more entrepreneurial, but so does science make sense? Then
Mhm.
you realize science is at the root of how the world works. Of
It's
course, it's always
everywhere.
going to make sense. I almost feel like science should just be like a major or minor requirement, right? Because if you don't understand the way things work, I mean, how can you make anything? How can you develop a product? And so the analytical thinking that you get from studying science and math, I think will help you in any field.
I
And
agree.
I saw that a lot in at Givaudan as well. You saw people with math PhDs in marketing. So
Mhm.
it's like I got to see that at a much higher level, and so that was really exciting and reassuring for me.
I think it's important to point out that being a science major doesn't necessarily box you in. And I think that both
No.
of you are just great examples of that. And also having great role models that maybe don't fit that stereotypical mold of what a scientist is, right? Like,
Exactly.
I
It's
think we
very
should
true.
reclaim nerdy and redefine nerdy,
Absolutely. There's
because
nothing better though. I mean, listen, I thought nerdy was cool. I was the president of the chemistry club. I was like the ultimate. There's nothing wrong with being nerdy. It's a great thing.
Absolutely. Who did you look up to, Amanda?
Um, this is interesting because, like, to think about like a STEM leader that I followed when I was younger, that there weren't that many. But I
Mhm.
can definitely look to, like, as Seda was saying, like my own mom as well. Like, we moved around every 2 to 4 years because my mom's career, and she worked from the ground up, making, excelling in her career, and it made me think, like, okay, I want to do something too, that, being able to build something on your own and being able to work hard and just continue to work hard to take care of yourself and taking care of your family. So she just told me like, do what you want, but never forget to work hard. And then I remember my 10th grade chemistry teacher. Her name was actually Professor Deloach, and she was the one that was always just trying to make chemistry fun.
Yeah.
Mole is to mole is to mole. I'll never forget that. And she would just always just like, it's people to just encourage you
Yeah.
to do what you want. And those were the ones that really stuck with me. Not like follow this path XYZ, just do what you want and maybe this will be interesting to you. And then I had a great organic chemistry teacher in college, Professor Canary, just teaching, all like that. But he really cared, and then from that, that's where it started.
Yeah.
But it was hard at our old company to find women in leadership who are in the STEM fields, in manufacturing, in the labs. That there weren't any. So you sort of have to build your own path and being able to find people who would encourage you along the way.
And that leads to one of the things that I wanted to ask you is we had spoken before, and I was surprised but not surprised that there just isn't really good female representation at the leadership levels within the cosmetics
No,
industry of of all
no,
industries, right? You're catering primarily to women, and it's an industry run primarily by men. So
100.
tell me a little bit about what that experience was like for you, and what was surprising, what was disappointing, and where did you see yourself making change?
So for me, I think it was so surprising for me when, out of college, I started at a small, as a cosmetic chemist, that you had a lot of women formulators in the lab, but in management, you had zero.
Hmm.
So the decision makers at the end of the day were pretty much all men. And I was so shocked by it because I thought to myself, and it's not to say that they cannot be in management and that they don't have perspective on the beauty industry, but I thought, you're not even the one. Like, you're wearing these products, and at least, and I'm referencing the men that I worked with 0% of the time. And yet you're making all the decisions on how
Hmm.
they're developed and how. And it was right then and there I said to myself, I mean, I think within the week one of working at that company, I said, I need to make a change. I need to launch my own brand because there's such a big disconnect here. And even at, the fragrance house that we worked with, a lot of people don't know about the fragrance industry. And it's a very, what Amanda, previously said, it's happenstance. You stumble across that industry.
Hmm.
It's really run for the most part by 5 major fragrance houses that probably develop, I don't know, 90% of the flavors and fragrances that we experience on the day to day.
Wow.
Yeah, it's and you don't even know that all of this is happening until you come across that
Yeah.
industry. And it's a wonderful industry. It's a very old traditional industry
Hmm.
that's pretty much rooted in, from France, in Grasse, France. And so, and it's a wonderful thing to have all this heritage, but what comes along with heritage is older ways of doing things and older ways of thinking. And so I personally experienced a lot of that in every part of our process at the company. And we did not have a female in the C-level, I think, until maybe, and I'm going to estimate here, 6 years ago.
Mm.
And I think they fought to put her on there. I
Yeah.
think the industry was trying to shake everybody up and saying, what's happening here? But it was so disappointing to see that it took that level of noise to even make that sort of change. I mean, this person was more than equipped to handle any job at that company, let alone the one that she was finally awarded. It was so well deserved, but it was, for me, so disappointing. I felt
Mhm.
so upset that they were making such a big deal out of this one woman getting that role, like we accomplished something huge. I
Right.
thought to myself, why is this an accomplishment? Why are we even having this conversation?
Yeah.
And it got me so angry. And so I always said, I mean, from day one, I think somebody asked me, like, where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years? And I would tell them very truthfully, so, and this is what you should not tell your boss if you want a promotion. I see myself having my own company because I get very stifled by old ways of doing things and by somebody telling me how to do something. And so a lot of these industries that are rooted in heritage and tradition, they're wonderful and it's very special, but it's also rooted in much older ways of thinking.
Hmm.
And so we just thought, we got to do it our own way. Um, and that also includes agriculture because a lot of what we do is grow our own ingredients.
Hmm.
And so that's yet another industry where I think STEM is now having a lot of, it's a lot of people in STEM are going into growing and agriculture. It's a major now in so many universities, and specifically indoor farming, which is what we're incorporating. So that's super exciting too. Yeah, but that's also an area that you'll find probably even less female leaders. And so, yeah, we're hoping to, shake things up a bit and, inserting some of, our values that we just learned growing up. And for us, it was never about female versus male or any of that. It's
Hmm.
just,
Working
as
hard,
people
yeah.
working hard, and paving the way and doing the right thing. And so we're really excited to have that opportunity because we realize how special it is.
And that's the thing, like finding the way to do the right thing. And sometimes if you're having to do things the old way, you don't necessarily get to have that opportunity.
Absolutely. And so tell me a little bit, obviously you made a really big pivot, kind of
Yeah.
left your corporate jobs where there was a secure paycheck every week, every
Yes.
other week, and you took a really huge leap into launching ESAS. So tell me about the timeline and kind of what went into thinking, "Hey, we should do this. Wait, we're really gonna do this. Okay, we're doing this."
That it's all of
That's
those
exactly
feelings
that.
over a very long period of time. I have to say, it's one of the most emotional things I've ever had to experience.
I bet.
I, worked at that company for 15 years and we had such an amazing, strong team, a very close team. And so leaving them was like leaving a family. And it was something that I think took me 2 years mentally to prep for it. I'm not exaggerating. And so I did just that. I started to mentally prep. I started to, what I always say to anybody, because they always say, how did you leave that job? You had an amazing salary. I'm like, I know, don't remind me. And you had all the support and the career ladder was just fantastic. I mean, everything was going right. And I had so many people tell me, everything's going right. What are you doing? And I was like, don't tell me, I know. But, I say, just write your resignation letter or write that date down on a piece of paper and magical things happen. And once you put something out there in the world kind of works to help you get to where you want to go. And so for me, it was about putting it out there on paper, literally. And interestingly enough, I had put it, the date down. I wrote it down in like some, random calendar that I had. And I never really looked at it again, but in retrospect, I looked at that date and I ended up quitting, I think a month after that.
Wow.
So it was just kind of really amazing to see how that came together. But it was really tough, but I knew I'm so passionate about what we're doing. I never had any doubt about the right decision. I feel so good about being able to do what we're doing that, for me, the risk was only if I hadn't left.
Mhm.
You know, the
Right.
money is something that obviously you need to plan for, but that's not a key motivating factor for how I want to live my life. Granted, you need it. Just putting that out there. um, and but they say do what you love and the money will eventually come, and
Mhm.
that's what we keep telling ourselves. And we just love what we do and we feel so good that we're able to develop products that are good for people, that are sustainable. And in an industry that's so unregulated, there's a lot, it's so misleading. So we feel that there's an opportunity to really make a change there.
Absolutely. Amanda, what about you? What was that like?
Yeah, that was scary too. So I worked at the old company for about 10 years. I was an intern there. Like I grew up there and I learned a lot. And we're both very grateful for what we've learned there. But before we quit, I mean, we were spending nights and weekends really just thinking this over and really trying to figure out what we wanted to do, and we couldn't stop thinking about it. It was a burning passion that was relentless.
Yeah.
So after a while, we were just like, let's put down the date. And then both of us quit like a month after we had that date in mind, and it's just like we couldn't forget about it. We lost sleep over this project, this idea, this brand, that we just had to do it.
It
And
just won't go
that
away,
become
right?
that
It
wouldn't
won't go away.
away.
It actually gets bigger. The more you try to suppress it, the more like that flame burns, you know?
Yeah.
You can't forget about it, and the opportunity to build a brand, build a business with someone that you really trust, like it's meaningful.
Yeah. And I think that's also the hardest thing to find.
Yeah.
To find, we worked with enough amount of people to know that people you trust, get along with, and are complementary to one another is really hard to come by.
Mm.
And so, you have an idea, you have an amazing partner, you have all the support in the world, you now have a combined like 25 plus years of expertise. To
Mhm.
not quit would be just insanity,
Yeah.
And so we're like, we don't have a choice. Like we literally don't have
Right.
a choice,
The the
So,
risk of inaction sometimes is much
oh,
greater, like you were saying. What if I didn't do
Absolutely.
this? Where would I be? So,
exactly. I was losing sleep, like
Yeah.
Amanda said. I think my last 2 years at my previous company were pretty sleepless.
so
So,
we talk about pivoting and leaving your corporate job to launch your company, but when you launched, there was another really big pivot that
yeah.
basically the pandemic happened and you kind of switched gears. Tell me about that.
Yeah, we quit our jobs the summer of 2019. So to think about launching in 2020, we didn't have the idea of the pandemic at all.
No,
Right?
that wasn't in our plan.
Not
But we did
planned.
not planned, but we did have a list of products that we were interested in launching, and Colonia.
Yeah. So, my family comes from Turkey and I grew up very Turkish. And so it's funny when the pandemic started, we had, like Amanda said, we had been developing now for an extremely long time all these different products, organic cosmetics, organic skincare. And then our world changed and we had to wear masks and we had to stay home. And we're like, okay, well, all of these are irrelevant. So, we can waste our time on that or we can quickly adapt. And
Mhm.
luckily, because we manufacture our own products, we're able to quickly pivot. And so, um, my cousins kept calling me and they're like, Seda, we're running out. We can't get our hands on hand sanitizer or the Turkish version, which is called Colonia. And I'm like, oh God, I don't have time for you guys. Stop calling me, hanging up the phone, not picking up their calls. And I'm like, wait a second, Amanda, we could totally take the concept of colonia and optimize it for today's standards. And so, making it healthy, making it sustainable, but also making it, like you said, anti-aging and moisturizing and all, we could pretty much do whatever we want with it.
Yeah.
And so we looked at the formula, we completely stripped it down and made it our own. It has very little to do with the classical colonia, which is just water, alcohol, and synthetic fragrance. Um, and so we quickly pivoted. We worked with Erica, and we were
Mhm.
lucky to have by our side. And we were able to honestly very quickly launch Colonia. I think, well, when I say quickly, we did a substantial amount of testing. We had to develop all the fragrances. It still took us from, March to August probably to make sure that, all of our ducks are in a row. We had all the testing that we needed. And so, yeah, we launched 5 months ago at this
Yeah.
point. And,
Insane.
we had a really nice reaction to it, which is really great. People really love the product. And so we kind of decided to focus on that. And so we're continuing to focus and support that line of product. And, we'll see where it goes.
And it was just so timely. I mean, it just speaks
Yeah.
to I love how it speaks to the bringing together of of these Turkish traditions, right?
Yes.
Something that's been around for generations upon generations. But then you two ladies step in and you kind of change it up, create something new that is just a reimagining of Colonia and adapting it to the pandemic and modern times.
Hmm.
And probably it's going to have its place even in the future. Hand washing, hand
Yeah,
sanitizing it's just so much more heightened in our awareness now that
absolutely.
even after I think things get under control, people are going to say, you know what? Maybe masking during the wintertime when it's cold and flu season,
Sure.
maybe just having hand sanitizer on me all the
Hmm.
time is something that we're going to do hopefully forever and we'll
Yeah.
just be
Exactly.
healthier for it.
Exactly. And I think now we know why Colonia was so popular 200 years ago.
Yes,
Maybe,
exactly.
right? I'm like, oh, maybe this is why they adopted this. And so, yeah,
Oh, it's great.
we hope people enjoy using it. And, we're excited to see, I think, the future of our products in general and the future of the brand to see where it goes. And
Mhm.
it's nice that we can adapt so quickly.
Absolutely. I think that's gonna be, that's the key to
Key.
survival of upstart companies. And I think
Yes,
sustainability of a business is just that
exactly.
you look at the times and what's happening around you and
Hmm.
Mhm.
and adapt as needed. So I love that you guys are able to do that. So
Yes.
I'm gonna switch gears a little bit because selfishly, I always like to pick the brains of my guests because clearly you're innovating, you're very successful, and you're doing just awesome things. Like if I had to have an alternate name of the podcast, it'd be like just women doing awesome things.
That's
So
awesome.
I always like to ask, what do you do in your day to day
Mm.
that makes you as successful as you are? Like do you have a life hack, a favorite life hack, or a favorite thing that you do to make yourself more productive, boost your productivity, boost your efficiency? What would the each of you say that is?
I actually love that
Yeah,
question
that's great.
because for me, that's where this lifestyle kind of all started. And so I had Lyme's disease maybe 6, 7 years ago, and it completely like eradicated my immunity as we know it. And so I had to adopt a different lifestyle, and I did. And so I don't know if you ever heard of bulletproof coffee,
Mhm.
the whole bulletproof lifestyle, but I swear by it. And this is not like an ad at all, but my every morning, I have a ritual, and it starts with Wim Hof breathing and bulletproof coffee. And the idea is that we work 15, 16, 17-hour days easily, and we do everything. We're the manufacturers, we're the sourcers, we process also some of our own extracts, we work on the branding. So this is the team. And so we need to be fueled and productive that many hours a day. And we need to feel good. Excuse me, we can't get sick. So, we make sure that we really take care of our bodies and our minds. And so that's kind of, my morning ritual for me is everything. And I cannot do anything without my morning ritual. And I'm so happy to, have developed that over the years because I think it's essential,
What
you
is
know.
Wim Hof breathing? I've never heard of that.
Oh, it's amazing. It's you have to look him up. He's this really eccentric Dutch guy. And you might have heard, if you haven't heard of his breathing, he's all into like cold therapy. So he's like jumping in cold frozen lakes and
Mhm.
doing all those crazy things, which I do not do. Uh, but one of the things that I did adapt from him was the breathing. And so it really enhances, sort of your thinking. It helps reduce anxiety. It's like 10, 15 minutes long, and it's short stints of like 30 like intervals of heavy breathing. And so what it really does, and his concept is that, your breath is at the core of who you are. And if you're able to control your breath, you can control anything in this world. And I found that to be very true. And so it's like, we have ups and downs in our days, as everybody does in our lives. And if you are able to have some control over your breath, or if you're able to use your breath to control sort of, your emotions, then you can get through anything, because that's really what it is, right? It's just our day is a compilation of just breathing, and how you
Absolutely.
breathe really controls how you react to things. And so for me, it's like that's key.
I love that. Amanda, what
Yeah.
are your life hacks?
I mean, in the same breath, it's like that taking that step back every day, being able to take a step back before launching into your day is incredibly important. Um, I do the Calm app every day, just doing the 10 minutes meditation, 20 minutes meditation, because I can definitely let things fester. I can definitely lose sleep over things just festering. But if you're able to take a step back with meditating, that makes a huge difference. And then I also do the bulletproof coffee as well. It's just a nice reset to start of your day. And honestly, it just gives myself, so I have the 20 minutes of my meditation and then your 10 minutes of coffee. And that just like gets you ready.
It's all about that self-care, you can't do
Absolutely.
anything without it.
Yes.
Because
And whether you're running a business or like myself being in medicine and taking care of patients, it's just become ever more apparent, especially during our pandemic times, that we have to take care of ourselves so that we
Yes.
can take care of others or
Yeah,
take care of our business. And
exactly.
and
Absolutely.
you hear so often about how highly successful, highly efficient individuals have a routine. They have a ritual, whether it's
Yes.
a morning ritual or an evening wind down ritual, weekly, monthly. And it just underscores the importance of having that routine in our lives to sort of, it's almost like a reset button.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate what you're saying about just kind of not letting things fester. You kind of have to deal with them and release
Mm-hmm.
them if it's time for them to go.
Yes,
So
daily.
I love it.
exactly.
I think it's really great advice. I'm a little bit on the wagon, off the wagon with meditation. I find
Yeah.
that when I am on, it just changes so much for me. And so my meditation teacher, Jill
100%.
Winner, will be really happy to hear that you ladies are practicing it in your day to
Mm-hmm.
day
And
as
it's not
well.
easy.
Not
Yeah, it's
easy.
not
Not
easy. I think
easy.
the first 5 minutes of the meditation, I'm like, I don't want to listen to this. I don't want to do this. And it's not till after that you're like, okay,
It's
that
so
was
true.
worth
I think it took
it.
me a
Yeah.
year to
Yeah.
meditate 10 minutes without feeling anxiety.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's so important to know, because so many people quickly become demotivated from it because they're like, this is
Mhm.
not for me. I used to say that. I'm like, I have too much energy. I have way too much anxiety to meditate. And then I realized that's precisely the reason I need to
Yes.
meditate. And so I was like, okay, I need to unlearn what I thought about myself and just adapt new tools of dealing with certain emotions. And it's the best thing. Meditating is amazing.
I love it. Yeah, I'm glad I'm not the only one where,
No.
literally the first couple of minutes, I'm like, I suck at this. I suck at this. What am I
Yeah.
doing? And then I'll say,
Yes.
wait, I'm doing it. And then,
Yes.
oh, my 20 minutes are over.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. Those motions.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm going to share a quote with you. I'm sure you've heard it, but I would love to hear your thoughts on it. So you are the sum of the 8 people with whom you spend the most time. Who makes up that inner circle for you? I'm sure you're sitting next to one of them, but
Yes.
tell me about that.
Do you want to go first?
uh, 8 people. Yeah, I
It
mean,
doesn't have to be 8, but like
Yeah.
your highlights. Who are your highlights?
yeah, I think
In a
it's
normal year, maybe there's 8 people.
yeah.
Right.
Now I think, and that's a good point. During the pandemic, you really got to or I personally was able to localize who I'm spending most of my time with. And my parents live out in California, so I don't get to see them as much, and I didn't get to see them last year. So, talking to them over the phone and tuning with them and getting close to Seda, her family. That was like my biggest thing
Yeah,
for
my big
2020.
fat crazy Turkish family.
They're the
It's
best. They're
literally
the best.
Maybe more
that's
than
the
8,
sum,
huh?
more than 8. And each one of them is like more than 8.
It's the power of family being able, being there for each other. That really
Absolutely.
helps.
So I always like to also ask if you had one really big, good piece of advice for a woman who wants to follow in your path or just wants to do well in a very male dominated field. What is that piece of advice?
For me, I think the most creative like the version of yourself is you being yourself. So if that person can be themselves, that's the biggest win. That's the biggest win for them to excel in their careers.
Love
For
it.
me, having worked in very male dominated industries, but also having the support of females around me, I found that it's so easy to psych yourself out. So often I said to myself, I'm, this is not for me, or I can't do this, or, that person comes from here and or they're better than me. And for me, and, it sounds really cliche, but I guess, some cliches are there for a reason, but it's really believing in yourself enough to build the confidence that you can do anything that you truly put your mind to, and it's not easy, and I think really that's such an important part to, I think, understand that nothing worth having is easy. And so if you work at what you really want to accomplish, all these small little things will eventually accumulate, and before you know it, you're accomplishing things that you never thought you could. So it's really about taking on small little tasks to help you get there. It's like those math problems. You have these huge equations and you're like, oh my
Mhm.
gosh, I'm never going to come up with the answer. 5 pages later, one step at a time, you come up with the answer. So I think nothing is too daunting if you're able to break it down into its smaller parts and start tackling
Absolutely.
it that way.
Yeah, bite-sized, manageable pieces. They
Exactly.
add up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true.
That's
Yeah.
where it
Well,
starts.
I would love it if you would share where our listeners can find you online. You're obviously doing amazing and really interesting things. So I know that aside from, of course, looking for ESAS and the products that you're developing there, how else can they follow you online and follow your adventures?
So on Instagram, we're at ESASNYC.com, and ESASNYC is our handle.
Yeah,
Awesome.
on Twitter, on all the major social platforms, it's SSNYC.
Awesome. Well, I thank you both so much for being on with me today. I learned a lot. I think that our listeners will be truly inspired by what you do and everything that you're accomplishing. So thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so
We
much,
appreciate the
Amanda.
opportunity.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right. That's a wrap.